Welcome back to the Michigan Business Beat, brought to you on the Michigan Business Network. Chris Holman here, coming to you from our studios at the Capital Region International Airport. We're going to stay local, although our guest is not really locally tied because she's with Foster Swift, the legal firm that has offices all over the state of Michigan, and for all I know, all over the globe, because you grow at such a tremendous rate. Amanda Dernovshek is joining us right now. She's an associate with Foster Swift Collins and Smith with 6 offices across the state. And welcome back. Thank you for being our expert in-house that we can call on for topics like we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Well, it's always good to have you on. Let's talk about the Corporate Securities or Corporate Transparency Act. And I joked off air that I should be calling you about every 15 minutes because this thing has gone through some transitions.
Yes, agreed. So the last time I was on here, I think it was probably back in December or January, and there was a lot of action happening then. Courts all over the country were making decisions related to the Corporate Transparency Act and whether it's constitutional, whether it should be enforced. And frankly, there's been so many attacks on the Corporate Transparency Act, both from a legislative standpoint and from a court standpoint. Things are really changing very rapidly. So today I just wanted to talk about kind of the current status of the Corporate Transparency Act, what's happened in the last couple of weeks, and where it stands. So I have 4 points I want to discuss. The first is the Smith case in Texas. This was a case that imposed a nationwide ban on the CTA, and that basically said you cannot enforce the CTA. That was in place up until a couple of weeks ago, where the court in Texas said, oops, no, we think it's okay, you can enforce the CTA. So the FinCEN, which is the government agency that governs the Corporate Transparency Act, came out and said, okay, CTA is back on, and you have until March 21st to comply. And that notice came out on February 19th. In that notice, they said that they would use this 30-day period to assess their options for further modifying the deadlines, and that they were going to prioritize reporting for entities that pose the most significant national security risks. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know exactly what their intention is or how they're going to reprioritize different entities. So that's a very big unknown to me, and I think many people in the legal industry. So that was on February 19th. Fast forward a little bit, the U.S. Department of Treasury just this past Sunday issued a statement, and they said, we are not going to impose penalties or fines, and we're not going to be taking any enforcement action related to the CTA. So we acknowledge that there's this deadline of March 21st, but if you miss it, we're not going to do anything about it. The Treasury Department also said that they are going to issue a new rule and go through the proposed rulemaking process, which would allow individuals to comment on the Corporate Transparency Act. And they indicated that they're going to be focusing more on foreign reporting companies. From a regulatory standpoint, the Treasury said we're not going to enforce the CTA. And then from a court standpoint, there's the Smith case in Texas is still ongoing. There's a Top Shop case also in Texas that has oral arguments next month. They're going to be looking at the constitutionality of the CTA. And then simultaneously, there was a Michigan court this week that said the CTA is unconstitutional based on Fourth Amendment rights, which is the right against unreasonable search and seizure. So just to sum all of that up, you're probably thinking, Chris, like, well, what does this mean? What do we do? How can businesses comply? And I've had a lot of conversations with clients about that. And what I can tell you is there's a voluntary option to comply with the CTA, but there's no fines or penalties if you do not do that. And we do expect a new rule to be coming in the next 2.5 weeks or so from FinCEN. So I think it would be an absolutely acceptable approach to wait and see what happens. I would not be surprised if the scope of the CTA is drastically narrowed by this new rule. And so if you're sitting there and you're a business owner and you're worried about complying, I totally understand that. But I think that the CTA is kind of slowly dying, and I think it's okay to just sit back and wait and see what happens, especially given the whirlwind of activity the last 4 or 5 months.
Which honestly, I will say was your advice to all of us about 8 months ago. So you. Thank you very much for being totally accurate. You know, it's kind of interesting because you wonder why all these changes so quickly, and it's not like we're not becoming used to it with what's happening in Washington now.
Yep.
An order on Wednesday and then the rescinding of that order on Thursday. Is that kind of an indication of leadership at this point?
Yeah, I just think that they are evaluating what was happening before the new administration took over, and they're just kind of changing things as they see fit. And the CTA really, I think, just came on our president's radar as an issue. And so I think there are going to be quick changes now that it's on his agenda of items to discuss and address. We're going to be seeing some changes there. So hang tight. Things are changing. Feel free to call me as much as you want, Chris, even if that is every day as things are updated and ongoing from this point forward.
Well, we will pester you because I see more change in the future. Amanda Dernovshek, thanks so much. Associate with Foster Swift Collins and Smith. You are watching the Michigan Business Beat on the Michigan Business Network, and I'm Chris Holman.